7,317 total yards, 606 points scored, 4 Pro Bowlers, 15 wins. Mile High Stadium, and the entire NFL for that matter, had never seen an offense like the 2013 Denver Broncos. Putting up video game-like numbers on a weekly basis, Denver pioneered the modern-day offense. And the man pulling the strings behind it all was Peyton Manning. This team holds almost every single regular season scoring record to date and are widely considered the greatest offense of all time. But on the biggest stage of all, they fell short. So, how good were the 2013 Denver Broncos actually? Well, to answer that question, we have to start in 2011. Indianapolis Colts quarterback Peyton Manning was set to undergo his third neck surgery in the span of only 19 months. There were concerns that he would not only miss the 2011 campaign, but be unable to return to football entirely, as the injury left him physically unable to throw a football. He would go on to miss the 2011 season, and was later cut by the Colts at the conclusion of the season.
But I guess in life and in sports, we all know that nothing lasts forever.
The 36-year-old had already completed a Hall of Fame career, throwing for over 50,000 yards, almost 400 touchdowns, attending 11 Pro Bowls, and winning 4 MVPs, in addition to a Super Bowl MVP. But he wasn't ready to leave football just yet, so Manning searched for his next home, and the Denver Broncos took a chance on the veteran quarterback.
I have to go to work to make it the right decision to be a Denver Bronco, and I know John Elway and Coach Fox and Mr. Bowler are going to help me in that process.
Signing him ahead of the 2012 season. Proving he was far from damaged goods, Manning went on to throw for 4,659 yards and 37 touchdowns, earning the Comeback Player of the Year award, as well as leading the Broncos to an AFC West title. But the comeback story was stopped in its tracks when the team would lose a nail-biter double overtime divisional round matchup against the eventual Super Bowl champion Baltimore Ravens, famously known as the Mile High Miracle. Though, when the 2013 season rolled around, this team had become the preseason Super Bowl favorites, and the stage was set for them, a Thursday night season opener rematch against the reigning champs. Things started out a little slow for Denver, punting 3 times in the first quarter and falling behind 7-0 against the Ravens. But it was a second quarter touchdown pass to Julius Thomas that lit the fuse and got the season going for the home team. The Broncos went on to score 49 points in just 3 quarters, behind Manning's 462 yards passing and 7 touchdowns, the current single-game TD record in the NFL. This performance sent shockwaves throughout the league and sent a strong message on what was to come. They jumped to a 6-0 start on the season, scoring 50-plus points twice in wins against Philadelphia and the Cowboys. This unprecedented start would also set the record for the most points scored within the first 5 games of a season, with 230. They averaged 44 points and 476 yards a game in this 6-game span, where they also set a new NFL record for touchdown passes in the first 6 games of a season, with 22. There was no sign of this team slowing down, and opponents across the league took notice. With the deep threat abilities of Demaryius Thomas, the wide catch radius of tight end Julius Thomas, and the elusiveness and physicality of Wes Welker and Eric Decker, there was no way to game plan for this team. In a league that praised defense and physicality, the question quickly became, just how high could the Mile High Broncos fly? As the storybook season rolled on, the plot continued to thicken. The Broncos traveled to Indianapolis to face Manning's former squad for the first time since his departure, and after receiving a warm welcome back pre-game by the Colts faithful, Manning and the Broncos would find themselves down 36-17 in the second half. Indianapolis's hard-nosed defense helped keep the visitors at bay, but Denver did themselves no favors either, taking 12 penalties for 103 yards. But as expected of this offense, they wouldn't go down without a fight. They rallied back, posting an additional 16 points, but Indy was able to hold on with a final score of 39-33. Manning impressed, throwing for 386 yards and 3 touchdowns, but fell short to his successor, Andrew Luck. This loss snapped the Broncos' 17-game regular season win streak, but it was just a bump in the road, as the Broncos quickly got back on track in the following week when they hosted the Washington Redskins. Denver overcame a 2-touchdown deficit and finished the game on a 38-0 run to beat the Redskins 45-21. This output would also assist in setting the record for the most points scored within the first 8 games of a season, with 343. It was back to business as usual for Denver, and soon enough they saw themselves sitting at 9-1 after taking care of their AFC West foes, the Chiefs and the Chargers. But what better test could a team be given than a Sunday night trip to Foxborough to take on the GOAT? That's exactly what the doctor ordered for Manning's squad. Up to this point in his career, Tom Brady was the only person who could consistently get the better of Manning. Since 2001, Manning had a 4-9 head-to-head record against Brady, as throughout their careers, the two legends almost always led the two best teams in the AFC. And with this new-look, high-flying Broncos offense, Manning surely wasn't going to find himself bringing a knife to a gunfight. The Broncos wasted no time getting to work, as they would find themselves up 24-0 at the half against the Patriots. After all, this was arguably the greatest offense of all time we're talking about here. But Brady did Brady things, and the Patriots ripped off a 24-point comeback to take the game back in a 34-31 OT thriller. It would mark the largest comeback of Brady's career to date. Despite the loss, the Broncos would tack on to their NFL record of scoring 25-plus points for the 16th straight game. But on the other side of things, Manning had his worst outing of the season, passing for only 150 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 1 interception. While this game had heavy implications for AFC playoff seeding, it was apparent that the AFC was going through either Manning or Brady, like it had for so many years. Now, with only 5 games remaining in the regular season, the Broncos had their work cut out for them. The threat of New England down the road loomed large, and getting home field advantage and a first-round bye in the AFC became imperative for this squad. They couldn't achieve that without winning the AFC West title first. Lucky for them, they had a date with the Kansas City Chiefs at Arrowhead the following week, with a chance to break the tie between the two division rivals who were sitting at 9-2. But Alex Smith's squad had something else in mind, as they weren't looking to get swept by their rival in a span of 3 weeks, and the Chiefs quickly got out to a 21-7 lead and were firmly in the driver's seat. But after a touchdown pass to Sean Marino and then 3 more touchdown passes to Eric Decker, the Broncos had tacked on 28 unanswered points. The Broncos went on to win 35-28, and as you could imagine, broke a few more records doing so. Manning had set the Broncos franchise record for most touchdowns in a season, and this matchup also marked Manning's 8th game of the season with 5 or more touchdowns in a single game, tying Drew Brees for the most in NFL history. Not too shabby, considering there were still 4 games left to go. But there was a different edge to the Broncos' Week 14 matchup against the Tennessee Titans. The Titans got off to a quick start, leading 21-10 midway through the second quarter. Then the Broncos would go on a 41-7 run to close out the game, winning 51-28. And at this point, scoring 50-plus points and comeback wins were just the norm for this team. So why was this win different? Well, as you can imagine, criticism of Manning was relatively low for the 2013 season. But there was one knock on Manning that the naysayers wouldn't budge on: Manning not being able to play in cold weather.
The numbers show it, but he hasn't played in cold weather very much.
Historically speaking, this assessment had some truth to it. Even in the 2013 season alone, Manning's only sub-200 passing yard game came on a 22-degree night in Foxborough. But in this comeback win against the Titans behind Manning's 397 yards and 4 touchdowns, the temperature was 18 degrees Fahrenheit. Manning even threw a career-high 59 attempts this game, which makes you wonder if the criticism had gotten to him. Whoever wrote that narrative can shove that one where the sun don't shine. I felt pretty good out there today, Manning told Denver's KOA AM radio. So yeah, I think the criticism got to him. The Broncos then finished out the regular season on a 2-1 final stretch with wins at Houston and Oakland and a loss at home against the San Diego Chargers. They finished the regular season at 13-3 and clinched the sought-after first-round bye, as well as home field advantage through the AFC playoffs. With 606 total points scored, the Broncos now held the highest point total output in a season in league history. With 76 total touchdowns, they narrowly beat out the 2007 New England Patriots for the most touchdowns in a season. Thanks to Demaryius Thomas, Eric Decker, Wes Welker, Sean Marino, and Julius Thomas, they nearly doubled the record of players who had 10-plus touchdowns in a season, with 5, beating out the previous record of 3. And of course, Manning etched out a few records of his own. He set the league record for passing touchdowns in a season with 55, surpassing Tom Brady, who in 2007 had a total of 50. Throwing 4-plus touchdowns in 9 separate games, Manning shattered the previous record of 6, which was previously held by Dan Marino in 1984 and himself in 2004. And he would just narrowly, and in very dramatic fashion, beat out Drew Brees' record for passing yards in a season. In 2011, Drew Brees threw for 5,476, which Manning would beat by 1 single yard. But there was only one goal this team had in mind, and that goal only took place in January and February. It was playoff football. After their first-round bye, the Broncos drew their division rival San Diego Chargers yet again in their third meeting of the season. The Broncos got off to a quick start, taking an early lead by way of a Demaryius Thomas touchdown. The game remained stale for quite some time, as the Broncos took a 14-0 lead into halftime, grinding away the clock to take the game out of Phillip Rivers in the Chargers' hands. It wasn't until the second half that the Chargers started punching back. Keenan Allen caught 2 touchdowns in the fourth quarter, and the Chargers then recovered an onside kick, which resulted in a field goal and put them within one possession of the Broncos. The Broncos were able to continue to bleed the clock and narrowly avoided another heartbreaking playoff loss. They had punched their ticket to the AFC Championship and looked to accomplish what they weren't able to last year. But who was standing in their way? Who else? Tom Brady and the Patriots. But it was the Broncos' defense that showed up early in this game, forcing the Patriots to punt on their first 2 possessions. The Broncos would also go 3 and out in their first possession. After that, there was no looking back. Manning went to carve this Patriots defense, stringing together 6 consecutive scoring drives to take complete control of the game. This continued well into the second half. At the start of the second half, Manning orchestrated an 80-yard drive, chewing up 7 minutes off the clock and ending in another Demaryius Thomas touchdown. The Patriots looked to rally back, but the Denver defense had an answer for everything they did, and the offense was able to match any score they posted. Manning had 400 passing yards and secured his white whale in routing Brady in the playoffs. The Denver Broncos were headed to Super Bowl 48. They were set to play the NFC champion Seattle Seahawks. This Seahawks team, led by second-year QB Russell Wilson, finished 13-3 in the regular season, the same record as the Broncos. But the path they took to get there was almost the complete opposite of how this Broncos team's got here. While the Broncos were building the greatest offense we've ever seen, Pete Carroll and the Seahawks were building up the league's best defense. Anchored by the Legion of Boom with DBs such as Richard Sherman, Earl Thomas, and Cam Chancellor, this Seahawks squad had the fewest points allowed, yards allowed, and the most takeaways, the first team to lead in all 3 categories since the '85 Bears. It was time for a matchup between an unstoppable force and an immovable object. The stage was set on a chilly February evening in New York. The Broncos got the ball first, and the first scoring play of the game took place on the first play of the game. It was an errant snap by Broncos center Manny Ramirez that sailed over the head of Manning into their own end zone for a safety. The Seahawks quickly notched in back-to-back field goals, bringing their lead up to 8-0. But some damage control by the Broncos defense helped keep it as only a single-possession game. As the Broncos looked to resettle back into the game, the Seahawks had other plans. With only 2 minutes left in the first quarter, Manning threw a pick to Cam Chancellor, which ended in a Seahawks touchdown. Denver didn't panic, knowing they had Manning at the helm, and they had been in plenty of games like this during their historic regular season. He and the Broncos offense would start to find a rhythm near the end of the first half, making it into Seahawks territory for the first time in the game. Shortly after doing so, Manning would throw another pick, this time to Malcolm Floyd, who returned it for a touchdown himself. But there was still an entire half of the Super Bowl left to be played. But this one felt like it was already over, and it was. The Broncos could never get back into this game, as every ounce of opportunity they had was inevitably stripped from them by this stingy Seahawks defense. Their historic season would end in the most lopsided Super Bowl loss in the history of the NFL, as they lost 48-3. The loss struck debates and narratives in the football world that still live on to this day, and while it left many football fans underwhelmed by the game itself, it left us stunned and questioning what we just witnessed. After their magical season of breaking records and building legacies, how is it possible that the league's best offense couldn't put up a better fight against the league's best defense? Will we ever see an offense more talented than this one? And was this all the evidence we needed to prove that offense sells tickets, but defense wins championships?